Hello, welcome to the channel. In this episode, a philosopher is going to meet Arwen.
Hello, Miri here. Since I still can't record the screen, here is a very quick recap of what we watched. Frodo is in danger of becoming a wraith. We meet Arwen looking the beautiful elf she is. She has some interaction with Strider, ride hard, and offers to take Frodo herself to Rivendell so her dad can heal him. She gets rid of the Nazgul with some lordoftherings, and she then passes on her grace to Frodo.
Okay, so we've just watched quite a small segment of the film, but we meet a main female character, apart from the voiceover at the beginning. And I really like the feminine energy that she brings. What's your reactions to that?
Yeah, she does have a feminine energy, and in, I think, at least 3 modes, there is a somewhat maternal energy vis-a-vis Frodo, because she's looking after him. There's a somewhat sexual, romantic, or love energy with her and what you keep referring to as Aragorn, but only know as Strider so far.
Yeah.
So we have a mother energy and lover energy. And in addition to that, she has what we might call a spiritual energy as well. So you call it female energy, but I would probably break it down into those 3 elements. Not that spiritual energy is necessarily gendered, but that's definitely part of who she is. And that comes across partly in the way she's portrayed in this slightly ethereal, soft focus way, with a rather diffuse, almost luminescent quality to her face, and her clothing amplifies that. So there's something about her almost theophanous appearance, but also her spiritual powers, particularly in her ability to summon, first of all, the water, the rivers, to hold back the approach of the ring wraiths, but also then to invoke, or rather evoke, other forces around her in the service of healing or maybe not healing Frodo. So she has all of those things going on. And in reference to the first and third types of energy, mother and spiritual energy, I couldn't help making an association. I'm not saying this is in the film, but I made an association with the deposition. In other words, this is this moment after the crucifixion, when Christ is brought down from the cross and people are gathered round, and Mother Mary is looking over him and looking after him. And there is, what seemed to me kind of a reference to that Marian tradition, I suppose, of the fallen Christ and the Mother Mary looking after him. And I'm saying this is just in my head, not necessarily in the film. Although in some of the comments, quite interestingly, there are a few people who've pointed out what a devout Catholic Tolkien was. So, I'm not making a particular claim there, but I was struck by the iconography of all of that, and the pathos around the fallen young hero who is positioned somewhat as a figure of redemption in the film. Not exactly a saviour, but a saving figure to be, perhaps. So, I wouldn't want to at all overstress this, but I thought there was a little bit of that going on in all of this. And then when Arwen rides away with him on the horse with him at her lap, as it were, I thought that too was evocative of those scenes around the deposition.
Yeah, that's interesting, because from what I remember of the book, that didn't happen. That's something that a choice the director made to add her character, to change the character around so that she is there.
So those are the first and third aspects of what seemed to me her characterization there, the maternal and the spiritual. And then in the middle of that, we do have her as a romantic, isn't quite the right word. There's certainly some sexual energy that I picked up between her and Aragorn Strider. And I remarked in the last episode we first met Strider, I said, he seems to have main character energy like a lead man, implying that there might be a lead lady to come along. So it's perhaps not completely surprising that, lo and behold, Arwen pitches up, who seems to be of kind of, you know, an equal sort of sexual status, I suppose, or romantic status
Yeah.
to Strider. And, you know, one wonders, I mean, it's not obvious in that clip, but one wonders, you know, what else is going on in that relationship, what sort of level of intimacy there is between the two of them.
Yeah.
And obviously they're both incredibly beautiful. You know, talked about Strider before, very handsome, slightly Viking looks. And then Liv Tyler, also very striking, who has what Thomas Hardy described as Tess of the D'Urbervilles bee-stung lips. And I think Liv Tyler has lips which are also bee-stung a little bit.
Yeah, because she looks otherworldly. She's got a different look about her that just fits that description of an elf.
Well, I only half agree with that. I think she does look otherworldly, and there is this luminosity to her, and she's bathed in light and so on. And at the same time, I think there is an erotic frisson between her and Strider. She does have this rather kind of pouting expression on her face, so she's also quite real, earthly and sensuous at the same time. So she's, I think she's both otherworldly and of this world as well.
Yeah, I always loved that bit when Frodo first sees her and she's dressed all in white and she's like a saint coming out.
Yes, exactly.
And then we see her and then it changes and she's dressed like in a green dress. I always wonder, is that part of her magic, or is that how the hobbits are so kind of glistened by the elves?
Yeah, and obviously it could be both, but she is a bit like a saint. And actually the way, I was going to remark on this before, the way Frodo is filmed quite a lot thus far gives a kind of iconic quality to his face. He has that shining mien of an icon. There's almost plastic, slightly lustrous quality to the face. Not quite mask-like, but something a little bit preserved.
He's like one of those saints that when they stop them from...
He's being embalmed or something.
Yeah, he looks like an embalmed saint.
He does look that. Yeah, not completely, but there's just a little bit of that. It reminds me of going to Seville in southern Spain during Holy Week and seeing the plastic saints paraded on catafalques through the streets, where the skin has that slightly shining, slightly hard quality to it. And there's something in the way that Frodo is often filmed here which brings out that iconic shining quality to him. And again, I think that's probably why the association came to my mind of the deposition and Mary and Jesus. And I think you're right. She is presented, Arwen, as somewhat saintly in that scene, but earthly too, and maybe that's why she's got those two costumes.
Yeah, because when you see her as she is, she's dressed. She looks very like a wood elf or something. Dressed in green and brown, and she's very earthly. So she goes from that kind of heavenly look to the earth.
Well, she's earth and air, isn't she? And it's interesting because when we then cut to the world of Saruman and the quarry or cave or whatever mine that they're working in, that again is the land of fire.
Yeah.
So she's a counterpoint to that, and the language she speaks with Strider, which I'm assuming is Elvish, right?
Yeah.
Seems to have an earthiness to it. It reads a bit. I mean, we had the subtitles on. It reads a bit like, I don't speak Welsh, but it had a slightly Welsh Gaelic quality to it, perhaps. You know, which to me, maybe this is a stereotype on my part, invokes something quite earthy as well, or something of the wood, possibly wind. Yeah, but certainly something of the wood. You know, there's a Sylvan property to her. And then we did first see the elves going through the woods, didn't we, as well?
Yeah, the wood elves leaving. Yeah.
So are elves and wood elves the same thing?
No, there's I can't remember, but there's elves that live in different places.
Oh.
And there's a kind of hierarchy, I think, within them.
So what's Arwen?
She's from Rivendell, so she would be like a higher elf.
Yeah, and she has a queenly quality to her.
Yeah.
Something slightly regal, which would suggest that. And actually, when she and Strider are together, they give off a king and queen energy a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good observation. And we see her controlling the elements. So we see the ringwraiths being trepid about going into the water.
They're hesitating, yeah.
They're hesitating. But then they do kind of go in a little bit.
I was surprised by that. They seem to dabble their feet. They're like sort of bathers on Brighton Beach, aren't they? They're just going to dip their toes in. But obviously the water is shallow enough for them to venture a little bit into the water. And then Arwen panics and decides we've really got to repel them. So she summons up the energy. She I suppose, says a prayer, essentially, to invoke this force beyond. But it's interesting because, we'll come back to the ringwraiths, the Nazgul. The same thing, right? Yeah. Ringwraith and Nazgul. Yeah, okay. Because when it comes to Frodo's wound, we've had Strider recognise the limits of his own power, that he can't sort this out. He has to take Frodo to the elves. But then even Arwen seems to reach the limit of her power. She thinks he's slipping away, and we have this phase in that clip where Frodo himself seems to be in this intermediate world between living and dying, as though he's about to slip away completely, which is, by the way, is an interesting parallel with the ringwraiths, because they're neither living nor dying. And for a few seconds there, we have Frodo neither living nor dying, so they're both in this ambiguous space. But even then, she has to invoke her father, right, to come and be the one who can heal Frodo.
Yeah.
Is that right? So there's a limit on Arwen's power to heal as well. She can only do it with the help of her father. Have I understood that correctly?
I don't think so. I think she just... No, because we started watching the beginning of the next scene, which is when he wakes up in Rivendell.
Oh, okay.
But no, she invokes the kind of horses, the water horses, and then she says that thing of, oh, whatever grace I have, pass it on to him.
Okay. So we're not supposed to take it that she has mobilised her father's energy?
No.
Oh, okay. So by her own act of prayer, summoning, conjuring, she is able actually to save Frodo.
No, because we watched the beginning of that bit, but the next bit was him waking up in Rivendell.
Okay.
So it's when you see Elrond saying those words, that's him just as he's waking up in Rivendell. So it's her father that's doing that, and then we're led to believe that she's brought him there in time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
And what did you think of the prayer that she said?
Well, it was an invocation. She uses the word grace, which I think is an interesting one, because we had the word pity early on in the film. So we've pity and grace. These are, what should we call them? Moral, certainly. Spiritual, somewhat. Religious, marginally. Attributes.
Yeah.
So it does seem that the film is corralling this group of virtues, let's call them higher virtues, which are seen to be the ones that will ultimately prevail, as opposed to the other resources that might be mobilized, which are the ones we cut to Saruman accumulating, which are not forces of virtue, but forces of strength and might and energy and power, essentially.
Yeah.
So we have a contrast between, what you could call worlds of virtue and the force of virtue versus the world of the force of might. And
what would you say you've observed or learnt about the elves so far in what you've seen?
Well, first of all, when we first saw them riding through the forest, they seemed to be like wood nymphs, ethereal, potentially creatures of the imagination, and certainly ones that tread very lightly on the earth. And so to that degree, they're both there and not there. And I think that's obviously a theme, because we have the ringwraiths who are living and not living. We have Frodo in this phase of dying, not dying. And we have the wood elves too in this intermediary space. So it's quite interesting from what a philosopher would call an ontological perspective, that we don't have clear states of being, living or dead. There's a lot of in-betweenness. And we talked in the first episode about the Selva Oscura from Dante, which is a space of liminality and uncertainty between different realms, and the space then obviously of purgatory. So there's all of that going on. They're a little bit like angels as well. So that although they're of the woods, well, some of them are, the lightness suggests they're of the air as well. So it's earth and air seem to be the principal elements that they are connected with in some way. And there seems to be something to do with poetry, fantasy, and perhaps music. Not the percussive music that we get at the beginning of that scene, which is strident, perhaps, connoting the strider, but something much more lyrical and melodic, perhaps. Makes me think of folk traditions, the elves having emerged from or being part of the folk tradition. The other element we watched there was in the mines with Saruman's agents, who were having, in the previous clip, set to work pulling the trees up by their roots, are now seen in this dark quarry-like environment, partly a mine, partly a quarry, a pit. It's quite hellish, it's dark, it's fiery. There seem to be volcanic molten substances. We could be in the inside of some sort of volcano. And we have one of the most startling images so far, which is the birth, if that's the right word, or the birthing at least, of this strange formation, perhaps mutation, of the orcs, which is created out of this primordial slime at the bottom of this pit, as if Saruman is trying to genetically modify the orcs to produce an even stronger, more unassailable, perhaps immortal version of the orcs that can go into battle and survive almost anything, as if he's got some sort of Dr. Frankensteinian intent behind him to fashion beings which are a bit cobbled together and ugly and a feat of sort of weird scientific bricolage, but at the same time may outlast or outflank the orc race in some way. And the idea being that these really are just fodder for war,
super soldiers.
Super soldiers, but with no inner life that's worth preserving, that they will just be used for their military prowess, their strategic advantage, and then dispensed with. They don't seem to have any, certainly compared with the other side of the equation, there's no kind of moral character there. They're simply bred for, like, breeding attack dogs. They're just bred for their strength, their fearlessness, their mercilessness, their absence of humanity, actually. So in a way that, having watched this elevated form of almost divine humanity in these scenes with Arwen and Frodo, we have in these super orcs, or whatever they're called, a kind of anti-humanity created. They're Stygian, satanic, death-like, bog-like creatures that are raised among troglodytes and are going to be clearly bad news for anybody on the other side. But it's quite interesting. I also thought, but this is a point of view of the cinematography or the filmmaking of Alien, this the birthing of these slimy creatures out of this primordial soup, as if there is behind them some awful conjunction of beings that has produced them. They're conceived in some awful moment of tragedy or horror and could almost come from outer space, although they're very much of the earth. But they have that glistening, disgusting, repulsive quality to them, don't they? So it did make me think of that. And they seem to be created not actually, although, I was thinking there about the awful acts of reproduction that could have led to them, as in some Greek myth, where, a half creature couples with another half creature and produces these Caliban-like entities. In fact, they seem to be created almost in a smithery, like a smithy, like a blacksmith has just sort
Yeah.
of stirred them up. Maybe there's a bit of a reference there to the cauldron that the witches stir in Macbeth, you know, because they seem to be stirring up this sort of
Yeah.
vile concoction that out of some strange alchemical recipe will bubble up and form these absolutely disgusting, putrid beings.
Yeah, there does seem to be a theme in Lord of the Rings of digging deep and finding horrible things
Right.
and kind of consequences of digging too much. I don't know. I don't really know how they're formed. They just come out with the.
They seem like you know, if you stir, it's a bit like churning milk to create butter. If you stir long enough, solids begin to form, don't they? And then, in this case, the solids are these awful hobgoblin, homunculus-like creatures, little devils, aren't they?
Yeah, well, quite big, muscular devils.
Big muscular devils, yeah, in fact.
Shall we leave it there?
Let's leave it there. And please do subscribe to our channel. It's great when we see extra subscribers because that gives us a boost to keep going with this epic journey that we're on of having a look at all of the trilogy, the extended edition, actually, of the trilogy of The Lord of the Rings.
And it helps with the algorithm. It helps other people see the video. So, yeah, thank you.